Welcome and thank you everyone in joining BluJay's partner webinar with Loadsmart this fine Tuesday. I'm Lee Payne and lead our North American partner programs. Couple housekeeping items. Please know this session is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants shortly after the session. We'll be holding questions until the end as well, so please enter all questions into the GoToWebinar question pane in the control panel, and I'll be facilitating the Q&A from there. I'd also like to thank both Loadsmart and BluJay's marketing teams in helping us coordinate today's event. And for today, I'm happy to introduce our strategic partner, Loadsmart, who will share more about why we partner and the unique solution set alongside BluJay's subject matter expert, Bryant Smith. BluJay is excited about the Loadsmart relationship and the complementary, easy to implement offering for our customers. With that said, I'll introduce someone I believe to be both a colleague and friend, Hunter Yaw, Loadsmart's VP of Product Management and Business Development. Hunter?
Thanks, Lee, and hi, and good afternoon, everybody, and thanks especially to Brian as well for joining and helping us present our partnership together with BluJay. This is something that we have worked, a relationship and a partnership that we've worked to build together to add value to a range of shippers who are using all sorts of different BluJay and Loadsmart products. And we're really excited to have a chance today to really roll it out and help everyone understand in a little bit more detail what it is that we're doing together and why we see so much value for our customer base in offering Loadsmart solutions through the BluJay platform. And really going deep and giving anyone a chance to ask questions and help us clarify anything that folks would like to understand a little bit better. So I'll kick it over to Brian here to talk a little bit more about the benefits that we see of working together.
Yeah, thanks, Hunter. Thanks, Lee, for the introduction, and thank you for everybody for joining the webinar. We're incredibly excited to announce our partnership with Loadsmart. This is something that we've been working on since 2019, going through the design and forming the partnership, and we ultimately deployed the solution to the BluJay TMS for shippers in March of 2020. And it was quickly validated with one of our first shippers that went live on the API rating platform with Loadsmart, tendering 36 loads within the first month. So that was really a great testament to the solution and the value that our mutual customers are going to get through this integration with Loadsmart and BluJay TMS. The partnership we built was aligned to scale, right? So from the beginning, we knew that this was something that we wanted to build to be future-proof and would continue to support our customers into the future and quickly scale up so you're not going to run into any roadblocks along the way. So that was kind of the foundation. And through that, we had 4 major areas that we wanted to hit on: visibility, TMS capability, which translates into 100% tender acceptance guarantee from Loadsmart, real-time visibility, and savings, right? So those are the foundational pieces of this partnership. I'll hit on visibility first. Loadsmart is able to provide instant quotes, and shippers are able to book a truck in seconds, which kind of translates into that 100% guarantee of capacity, right? So through the BluJay TMS, with your existing setup, you have access to Loadsmart's rate right in the carrier shop and in the routing guide, which gives you real-time rating and pricing that allows you to evaluate the market compared to what you're seeing with your existing pricing as well as carriers that you're contracted with. And tying into that visibility, Loadsmart offers geofencing arrival and departure times, which are transmitted into the TMS. And you can also view that load tracking status updates in the Loadsmart portal. Extending the TMS capability, right? This kind of hits on the network piece of the BluJay DNA strategy. So BluJay has a ton of carriers already in its network, but what Loadsmart does is they integrate with all these carriers through their application and expands capability and uses their proprietary algorithms and rating engine to really get down to that long tail of capacity in the market. As we know, over 80% of trucking companies have 10 or less trucks, and combined with their visibility of where those trucks and drivers are at any given time, it helps match the perfect load and the perfect driver to get you guys the best market rating capacity as well as price. Translating that into real-time data through the SaaS solution with the pricing, tracking, and sourcing, it really opens up the capabilities of the BluJay TMS by leveraging Loadsmart's network that they've worked so hard to integrate with all these carriers. So it's kind of a win-win, no-brainer for both partners that we would want to work together and offer this solution up to our mutual customers and shippers using the BluJay TMS. And with those three items, it translates directly into savings initiatives, right? So you'll hear a little bit more about this later on in the presentation, but the Loadsmart rating engine can be integrated directly into dynamic routing guides, which are going to adjust based off pricing that's received, which will prevent shippers from getting higher rates or overspending on spot market, as well as the rating engine integrates with the carrier shop also. So you'll see that, but essentially just know that it's expanding the footprint of your carrier capacity sourcing with no risk whatsoever, and will drive market rating and increase cost savings through the mutual solution between platforms. Hunter, feel free to add on and advance.
No, I think that's great, and Brian, we appreciate the context to help folks understand really what it was as we initially discussed and aligned with BluJay to understand what was the opportunity and why should we partner together, and why, frankly, would our customers care about this. And I think that's a great understanding of what value potential we saw there. And I think from there, we'd love to take the opportunity first to get a little deeper on exactly who Loadsmart is and what we do. I'm confident that everybody on the call is very familiar with BluJay and the value that the BluJay offers as a technology and also as a logistics as a service provider. Not all of you may be as familiar with Loadsmart. We like to think of ourselves as the nerdiest freight brokerage you'll ever come across. But that also means sometimes that we're not as prominent in the market as some other folks in the space. So we'll take just a second to tell you a little bit about how Loadsmart acts as a technology company, automating the shipping of full truckload and intermodal freight, as well as how it's priced and tracked. And the reason that we focus on automation, the reason that we believe that that applying technology to intermodal and to truckload shipments is a worthwhile exercise, is that we believe that there are fundamental inefficiencies in the market, a huge number of empty miles and a huge number of missed opportunities that result in shippers and carriers not always having the chance to connect in the best way possible. And that technology is a large part of the way that we can create those better, more effective connections to improve service, to reduce cost, and partnerships with BluJay are a big part of how we do that. So as we mentioned, integrating with BluJay's cloud-based TMS allows customers to access Loadsmart's rates within the BluJay platform. And a big part of this is our Loadsmart's core belief that we need to be where our customers are, that asking our customers to come to our website, to come to our app, to come to our platform is really unreasonable, because when you're talking about folks in the transportation space, logistics professionals, you're talking about people who are already swamped. They're already way too busy. They've got way too many tabs open in their browsers and way too many different systems that they're being asked to monitor. So asking them to remember another login, another password, another website to open another tab we think is just unreasonable. Instead, we want to respect the fact that a lot of our customers have chosen BluJay as the system where they want to manage their transportation, where they want to see all of their freight needs captured and tracked. And that goes all the way from pricing through to invoicing. And we believe that we should respect both the decision that our customers have made to be on the BluJay platform, and also respect the incredibly complex challenge that BluJay has taken on by creating that platform, and take advantage of the opportunity to plug into that existing ecosystem rather than trying to drag shippers away from where they already want to be doing business, to ask them to come to us. Instead, we want to be where they are. Where a lot of our customers are is on BluJay, and so it's for that reason that we wanted to connect to BluJay to be able to offer our services directly within the platform, to be able to drive that visibility, that efficiency, without asking customers to leave the system that they've chosen to use to manage their transportation through BluJay. So the question then becomes, okay, it's great that we've partnered with BluJay, it's great that we have all this excitement, but what exactly is the problem that we're trying to solve here? And the basic problem that we see is that we believe that full truckload shipping has operated the same way for far too long. The first challenge that we've identified is rate discovery. What do we mean by rate discovery? By rate discovery, we mean that in the past, in order for a shipper to understand what their pricing options were, not to book a load, not even to pick a specific provider, but only to know what rates were out there, what rates are available, you had to pick up the phone, you had to send an email. And we think that that's just unreasonable. That's as bad as if people were still expected to get airline rates by calling airlines directly or by calling travel agents. No, the expectation should be that a busy logistics professional at a shipper who needs to understand what their options are from a pricing perspective to move a load should be able to have that pricing data at their fingertips. Discovering the rate shouldn't be a challenge. Discovering the rate should be trivial. It's the decisions that you make about which provider to go with. That's where logistics professionals at the shipper should be focusing their time. So we, out of respect for that, should be helping to make their jobs easier, not harder, by delivering the rate right in front of them instantly to allow the rate discovery part of the process to be instant and easy, rather than expecting them to go out of their way just to get prices, only then to begin the challenge of determining which provider to work with. A second challenge, and this is especially true in the spot and routing guide space where Loadsmart does a lot of our business, is unpredictable performance. Shippers will know and prefer a lot of their core carriers with whom they do a lot of volume and business. And Loadsmart does act as a primary or contracted carrier for a lot of our customers. So we understand and take very seriously the commitment that being a primary carrier represents. But we also see that the challenge that a lot of shippers face is that when, for whatever reason, a primary or an award carrier can't move a load, whether that's because they're forced to decline a tender on a lane they've been awarded, or because the customer's volume has maybe exceeded that award and the carrier just isn't able to support that extra volume, the shipper is then forced to go out to that spot market or to go deeper into their routing guide to carriers with whom they don't have that same level of relationship. And unfortunately, they are then exposed to service risks. They're exposed to the risk of service failure and to unpredictable performance from that carrier base. And Loadsmart believes that the fact that you're going to the spot market or going to a backup rate or a real-time rate should not mean that you have to cross your fingers and hope that that load is going to pick up on time. Should not mean that you have to worry about the service level that you can actually expect to be delivered. We believe that the fact that it's an instantly bookable or a spot rate should not mean that we compromise on service. And so Loadsmart has invested a huge amount, both through technology, but also through process and frankly, just a commitment to our customers to make sure that we are able to deliver predictable, solid performance, the same sorts of expectations in terms of on-time pickup, on-time delivery, communication scores, and really just the spirit of partnership and support for the customer for a spot load that most shippers expect of their contracted carriers. The third piece is the lack of automation. And when people hear about automation, they think, oh, are you trying to dehumanize the industry? Are you trying to disintermediate? Are you trying to put people out of their jobs? No, absolutely not. Anyone who is a logistics professional day to day knows that there are more tasks to be done than there are hours in the day. And Loadsmart's belief is that the folks who work at shippers, the folks who work at carriers, deserve to be able to spend their time solving real challenging problems and investing in building and managing relationships with their vendors and their customers and their partners, rather than having to waste their time executing small manual tasks, which would be much better done by a system, freeing them up to use time that they already don't have enough of to focus on more interesting problems and more important problems that really do justify their attention and their energy. So by automating as much of the process as possible, we believe that we achieve two things. First of all, we believe that we free up our customers and our partners to spend their time and their energy on more valuable tasks. But second of all, we believe that by bringing in more data on truck availability and load availability, and by aggregating them on a single platform that's powered by machine learning algorithms, we look for and are able to identify better matches than are possible when you're asking a person to consider every possible carrier who could move every possible load. An algorithm can consider tens of thousands of carriers who could potentially be a match for a load and decide on whether their expected service performance and price would be a good fit for the shipper in the time that it takes me just to open my email or type in my password. So we believe that the algorithm is much better suited to trying to identify those matches, find those opportunities, and deliver to the customer the right carrier at the right price, and allow everybody else at the shipper and the carrier to focus on more important operational issues, whether that's exception management, whether that's relationship management, or other areas of the business that are worthy of their attention, worthy of their focus, and that aren't better done by systems. And anything that is better automated, which an algorithm can make a faster decision considering more information, that's an area where Loadsmart can add value to make better matches to save our customers money, and also hopefully to take some of the pressure off of the folks in both the shipper and the carrier who are otherwise inundated with a lot of these tasks. And finally, we see a lot of fragmented platforms and interfaces. It's an interesting time in the logistics space in that there are a lot of folks coming in and trying to provide different solutions. And of course, as Brian mentioned, you've got a huge number of small carriers as well as, of course, smaller and medium shippers out there. So you've got a bunch of solution providers, a bunch of shippers, and a bunch of carriers all trying to come together into this market. And of course, that results in fragmentation, which results in different solutions, different websites, different phone numbers, different emails, different logins. And that fragmentation creates complexity, it creates confusion, and it reduces the velocity and the efficiency with which freight gets moved. Loadsmart believes that by integrating with as many of these platforms as possible, we can bring all those solutions into one place and offer the value that things like tracking, better scheduling, better invoicing provide to the customer, but without expecting the customer to have to go to 10 different interfaces to get that. We believe that's very much aligned with BluJay's philosophy of bringing as much of this as possible within the BluJay system, which is why we're so excited about this partnership and this integration. So let's get into a little bit more detail. Let's talk about the 4 specific parts of the life cycle of a shipment, where Loadsmart really invests in adding as much value as possible. And the first one that we're going to start with is the process of accelerating rate discovery and adding instant rates to your TMS. So let's go a little deeper on that. So it can feel sometimes like getting an instantly bookable rate from a carrier or a broker is a little bit like Monopoly. You've got to go forwards, backwards, and roll the dice in the hope of getting the result that you're looking for. And we really just don't feel like it should be that hard. We recognize and understand that the challenges that logistics professionals and planners, coordinators have within the shipper are bad enough or challenging enough every day anyway, without also feeling like you have to, pass go and do not collect $200 before you can even understand what rates are out there, what rates are available. So we believe that this as a status quo is just not good enough, and that we owe it to the folks working at the shipper trying to identify the right option to give them a better solution, to get that instantly bookable rate immediately available right in front of them without them having to seek it out and go out of their way just to get a price, just to get an option that they can consider. So how do we do that? The way that Loadsmart does that is by investing a lot in artificial intelligence and using that to help to change the way that the supply chain is managed and the way that we structure the flow and the calculation of rates. Now, this can sound like a lot of buzzwords. People talk about artificial intelligence, they talk about machine learning, and sometimes it's a little unclear what they mean. But frankly, all that we're talking about are systems that, rather than having to be manually programmed, where we have to tell it, hey, in June, it's produce season in these states and these regions, therefore, increase your rates this amount for this period of time on these lanes. No, instead, what we do and our data science team invests in doing is creating a system which we can provide with huge amounts of data from all sorts of different sources and have that data serve as an input to a machine that is able to train itself by learning from its own successes and mistakes, and in doing so constantly adjust and improve on over 550 different features or dimensions that it considers when calculating a price. So we have some examples here, things that include capacity data, historical data, all sorts of inputs that we get from third parties. Where is the pickup? When is the pickup? What are the market conditions there? What's the equipment that's required? Where is the load going? What are the market conditions at the delivery location? What's the distance that we're trying to cover? That and hundreds of other factors are absorbed by the model in order to be able to provide an instantly bookable rate on any one of about 900,000 lanes across the US in between 2 and 3 seconds. And we believe that the value of this is to give the shipper that option that they can then execute, they can book immediately if they like it, and to be able to do that on any load moving on any lane at any time. So we give you that choice, we give you that option. And this is an example of the continuing evolution of the freight market, of the freight ecosystem, where over time, there's been this development, whether people were trying to go to the website or people were absorbing spreadsheets or getting that information somewhere else. We want to deliver that directly within your native TMS. So by combining the power of an algorithm that's able to calculate that rate instantly with the convenience of delivering it directly into the BluJay system, we create a flow whereby BluJay can tell us every time a BluJay customer wants to have a rate, wants to have an option on any load, we can instantly calculate that rate. We can push it back to BluJay. And so without the customer even having to ask, we've provided an option directly within the customer's native system, directly within that BluJay TMS, which gives the customer all of the freedom, the optionality, the choice that they should have, with none of the inconvenience and the hassle of having to pick up the phone or send an email to go out there and request that rate in the first place. So let's jump into the second point here, which is about beating the market by really being as smart as you can about your routing guide, and wherever possible, making that routing guide, your backup options, dynamic. So responsive to the market conditions and taking advantage of real-time rates. Let's dig into that a little bit. So a traditional routing guide, the list of backup rates, right, that you have when your primary or award carrier isn't able to move a load are static. And that makes sense. Usually what most shippers are doing is that they're running an RFP process. And as part of that RFP process, they're identifying carriers who they trust and who provided a competitive rate, but who didn't quite make it, who didn't quite get that award carrier or primary carrier status. And they let that carrier know that they're going to be a secondary or a backup carrier. So those rates get logged, and whenever the primary or the award carrier declines, the shipper is able to fall back on those backup rates and gradually work their way down that list, tendering the load to those carriers at that fixed rate in order to see whether the carrier is willing to accept. The challenge with this, though, is that first of all, those rates only get updated a few times a year, and as we all know, the markets are constantly changing. So there's a high likelihood that a lot of the time you're overpaying. And that may be true as well for your contracted carrier, where some parts of the year you know your rate's above market, some parts of the year your rate's below market. The difference is with your contracted carrier, you expect them to be accepting those tenders all the way throughout the year, through the good times and the bad in terms of pricing. But with your backup carriers, you don't have that same commitment. You didn't commit to award them the lane, therefore they're not going to commit to accept those backup tenders, except when they feel that those rates are above market. So that lack of update creates a gap, an imbalance, right, in the interests of the two parties that we believe can be addressed by having instant rates that reflect real-time market conditions to keep that routing guide competitive, to keep it dynamic. The other challenge is how quickly do you get the load covered? A lot of shippers will give backup carriers as much as 2 hours to respond to a tender. And if you figure it's not uncommon to have 5 backup carriers on a lane, that's 10 business hours, right? Which in a lot of cases can be more than 1 business day before you get to the end of your routing guide and realize that that load isn't going to be covered by your backup carriers. A day, and sometimes even a day and a half, anyone who's had to cover freight will tell you is a lot of time, and getting that much closer to pickup before you realize that this load is going to need to go to spot and you've got to pick up the phone and start to try to find a carrier. That's a long time. Loadsmart instantly accepts 100% of tenders. So as long as there's a Loadsmart rate in your routing guide, even if we end up being in the last position in the routing guide because our real-time rate at that particular moment in time happens to be less competitive than other providers, when you get to us, we will still accept that tender 100% of the time, which means that you don't have that risk of the load then sitting, falling through the routing guide and suddenly going to spot at the last minute. That means the freight gets covered faster, which of course then goes back to the point that we were making earlier and reduces the risk of those service failures and reduces the risk of missing that on-time pickup, which of course we all know is critical to the on-time delivery and the performance of the load. So let's keep going a little bit into the dynamics of this and understand how does it work at kind of a mechanical level. Well, if you take that static routing guide that I've been referring to, which is a very common procurement practice right across the industry, there's nothing to be embarrassed of about using that. You consider that, let's say you've got those 3 carriers A, B, and C, one at $1.25 a mile, one at $1.35, and another at $1.40. And I'm sure a lot of folks are looking at this and saying they'd be very happy to pay $1.25 a mile on just about anything. But let's take those rates as hypothetical for a second and compare that to the dynamic routing guide. In the dynamic routing guide, you're able to receive an instantly bookable rate from Loadsmart that is grabbed at the moment that that load hits the routing guide. So that rate isn't static. It isn't a rate that we've inserted in there and then it stays for a year. It's a rate that's constantly changing. Now, that means that sometimes we may be cheaper than carrier A. We might come in at $1.20 a mile. Sometimes we might be more expensive than carrier C. We might come in at $1.50 a mile. That rate's constantly going to be changing. But what it allows you to do is know that you're not just relying on the static rates. You also have a real-time rate that reflects the current market conditions and therefore gives you the opportunity when those conditions are favorable, when that real-time price is actually lower than those static rates, to take advantage of that. And because we accept 100% of tenders and because we take full responsibility, liability for the shipment all the way through to delivery, you know that you're not compromising your service by taking advantage of that real-time rate. You can have confidence that Loadsmart is going to deliver the same level of service that you would expect of your primary, of your award carrier, even on backup or spot or routing guide freight. So you're able to take advantage of that savings, of that lower cost by leveraging that real-time rate without feeling like you're compromising on service. And of course, because of our integration with BluJay and the way that BluJay has architected their cutting-edge cloud-based TMS, all of this can happen in the background, fully automated, with no intervention from the shipper if that's how you choose to set up your preferences. And Brian will talk a little bit later about how that can be set up, how it can be configured, how it can be customized. But for now, just it's great to explore that opportunity to have those real-time rates automatically requested, automatically received, automatically compared to other rates, and then the load tendered and automatically accepted by Loadsmart. So this is a load that can be where the rate can be requested, received, accepted, load tendered, load covered, all with no human intervention. So these loads that really should, in this sense, be managing themselves so that the load planners at the shipper can focus on more important challenges, this creates the opportunity to do that while saving money by taking advantage of those real-time rates. So here's a comparison just to kind of dig into that pricing advantage a little bit more. If you think about it, if you go across a year, and let's say that this is a lane in a market where you've got a big, call it, let's say a produce season peak around the middle of the year, around right now, right? Call it June, July. And that would be typical, certainly for a lot of markets where, for example, those outbound rates are going to go up as the produce season really hits. So you'll see that a peak in the middle of the year, but that might trail off on either side of the year. And of course, this is an oversimplification, right? Most lanes are going to be a lot more up and down than this. But for the sake of argument, let's imagine that the lane is as simple as that. Of course, those fixed rates, those static rates in your routing guide, they're not changing, right? So they're flat. They're staying the same all the way across the year. Now, as I said, sometimes the Loadsmart rate is going to be more expensive, and that's where you're seeing at the peak of this graph. But for a lot of the year, the Loadsmart rate is going to be less expensive than those static rates that you have in the routing guide. So when it's less expensive, you're going to save money by tendering to us. But it's also important to remember that even when we're more expensive than those static rates, those carriers are probably going to decline that tender, right? Because they're not obliged to move that load. They're not a primary reward carrier, and you're offering an under market price. So odds are they're going to say, no, that isn't a good fit for me. I could get a better rate on the spot market, and I don't have a primary commitment to the shipper. So I'm going to go ahead and decline that backup tender. If that's the case, even if Loadsmart's more expensive, you're still able to automatically get the load covered with Loadsmart before you have to go to the spot market, which, as we discussed, has the advantage not only of price, right? Because as most shippers will tell you, once you go to the spot market last minute, you're usually going to have to pay a premium. It also has an improvement on service because you have a commitment to Loadsmart in the way that you might not to the spot carrier you ultimately move with when you go out to that broader market. But also the load's getting covered sooner, which, as most folks know, will give you a much better chance of securing a carrier, locking in that truck, getting the tracking in place in time, and therefore increasing the odds of an on-time pick and an on-time delivery.
Thanks, Hunter. No, you did a
Sure.
really good job explaining that. And the dynamic routing guide piece, you know, it's automatic value insertion, right? You've got Loadsmart, and your graphic explained it incredibly well, right? You've got your defined list of carriers, and Loadsmart will be adjusted automatically based on their rate, kind of with that backup workflow, preventing that additional overspend and providing a systematic way for cost avoidance and savings. So what we've got here on this slide is the most simple form of how you can use Loadsmart, understanding that screenshot's relatively small on the screen, but I'll explain what this is here in detail. So for our BluJay TMS customers, you're probably pretty familiar with what you're seeing there, even though it's small. You've got our Freight Builder application, which is kind of the standard for where you would build loads outside of any automated workflow. So what we're showing here is your carrier rate shop, where you can pull Loadsmart's API rate at any given time by opening the carrier rate shop. So as soon as you click the rate shop, we're going to send that information through API to Loadsmart with information such as pickup and delivery date and time, origin, destination, geography, as well as the required equipment type. And their rate's going to be automatically inserted within your carrier shop there. In this example, you can see that they're actually the cheapest option. They're number one in the results. And the way that you can tell that this is a Loadsmart API rate is under that tariff column where there's usually a tariff name. It's actually blank. So the question might come up, well, what if I have contract rates on file with Loadsmart because I already use them as a contract carrier? And that's the great thing about the API rating is it's not going to disrupt any of that existing workflow. It's going to complement it. So if you already have contract rates with Loadsmart, we're not going to request an API rate because we know that you already have predetermined what your contracted rate is with them, and we're not going to disrupt that workflow. This is in addition to that. So you can use the two solutions simultaneously. And then digging in a little bit further into the dynamic routing guide options like Hunter was mentioning, this is kind of the manual workflow. And then when you want to, if you want to incorporate them within your routing guides, there's a few different dynamic options that the BluJay TMS offers, including one option would be creating a preferred list of carriers and incorporating Loadsmart in that preferred list where the system is going to dynamically rank Loadsmart at the time of the tender. Another option is you might not even have a preferred list of carriers. You might just say at any given time when I apply this routing guide, look at all of my contract and all of my rates that I have, including API from Loadsmart, and dynamically rank those. So there's really multiple streams of how you can leverage the solution. One being that, most basic format, which is your carrier rate shop, which gives you kind of a manual rate inquiry. And the second being dynamic routing guides, which is going to systematically insert them into your routing plan and generate cost avoidance through their dynamic API pricing.
Thanks, Brian. That's super helpful, and I think it's really key to clarify that all these things that we're discussing, they're not hypothetical or things that we'd love to be able to offer or will at some point in the future. All of this is currently available within the BluJay TMS and is very quickly and easily activated. So we really appreciate you providing that extra context for exactly what it looks like within the BluJay system. So let's jump into the third point and talking a little bit about tracking and visibility, which are critical, of course, to service and to making sure that the shipper has a full understanding of where their freight is at all times. So traditional tracking or track and trace is unfortunately usually a reactive exercise. It's about taking a situation that's emerged, trying to understand how it came about and what you're going to do about it, really only after the problem has already reared its head. Loadsmart believes that by investing a huge amount in real-time tracking, we're able to proactively stay ahead of the issue. And this is true even before the pickup, right? So making sure that we're tracking a truck and a driver several hours before the scheduled pickup to make sure that they're on time to get to that location, not just once they have missed the appointment, not just once the load is already at risk, but even well in advance of the driver's scheduled arrival at the facility, and making sure that we know where they are, how they're doing, and that they're on time for pickup. And if they're not, making sure that we're proactively looking potentially for an alternative, another driver, another carrier, even before the issue has cropped up, while at the same time communicating this clearly to the customer with a high degree of transparency and wherever possible, and as automated a way as possible. So this is also about using technologies like geofencing to track pickup and delivery, where instead of having to call the driver to ask, hey, are you at the facility, and then take their word for whatever the answer is you get back, instead by overlaying the real-time tracking that we're able to get from the vehicle with our understanding of that facility's location, our system can know that the driver's arrived even before they tell us, and in doing that, we can capture that check-in or check-out event in an automated way and accelerate the communication to the shipper, which rather than delivering that by having someone manually type that into an update or send an email, instead we're able to deliver that via API or EDI right into that BluJay system, so that the customer has full visibility into shipment events like arrival and departure from a pickup or delivery facility, but also location right throughout the life cycle of the shipment as the driver is en route. So the one of the ways that we do this that's a little bit unusual is that Loadsmart actually partners with ELD providers. So we believe that the fact that carriers who are crossing state lines or traveling more than 100 miles are now legally required, have been now for some time legally required to have an ELD installed on their truck, created an opportunity to capture tracking location directly from the truck. And to give you an example, Loadsmart does have an app, and some of our carrier partners do like to download that app and use it, especially some of the owner-ops in our network. But a lot of carriers have app fatigue. App fatigue is real. They're tired of being asked to download and set up a new app for every different load that they're moving. And if that's the case, we're more than happy to partner with the carrier by integrating actually directly with their ELD. So for a lot of the most popular ELDs, Loadsmart is integrated with their systems, so that all the dispatcher has to do or the driver has to do is log in to authenticate their ELD account. And from that, we're able to pull their location while they're moving freight for us directly from the ELD, saving them the hassle of having to download an app and allowing for that constant real-time location and tracking data to be consumed. So it's just another way where by using technology integrations and partnerships with the broader market, we're able to both improve the driver experience, but also critically make sure that we're getting that really high quality constant tracking data passed back to the shipper through the BluJay TMS. So geofencing, we mentioned, is another way that we're able to do this. So by recognizing where the pickup and where the delivery facilities are, and by overlaying the latest pings that we have on driver location with those facilities, we're able to know as soon as the driver arrives at or leaves a given facility, whether that's for pickup or any one of the deliveries that a load may have. And it's just one less step. It's one less time we have to bug the driver. It's one less question we have to ask the dispatcher, and it's one less task that the Loadsmart team has to do, because when all of this information is captured and analyzed automatically to understand, okay, if the driver's location overlays with the location of the facility, I don't need to call the driver and ask them if they're at the facility, and I don't need to call the dispatcher. I can have a better use for my time, and I can leave the driver and the dispatcher in peace to do what they need to be doing, and instead infer from the data that I have that conclusion and use that to more quickly communicate to the customer, while reducing the amount of unnecessary communication that has to go on between Loadsmart and the carrier, improving the driver experience, improving the dispatcher experience, and allowing us to focus our time on more valuable tasks. So the last thing that we want to talk about is how is it that Loadsmart goes about identifying the best carrier to move a load. We do work with a huge number of carriers across the US, but at the same time, we take full liability, full responsibility for all of the shipments that move through our platform. These loads are running under our SCAC code, they're running under our insurance, it's our responsibility, and frankly, we're putting our brand on the line every time we move a load. And as I'm sure everybody knows, a reputation takes a long time to build, but it can be lost in an instant. And so it's critical that we make sure that we're only working with carriers who we are proud to have representing Loadsmart as they're moving freight for our customers, because ultimately the responsibility in front of the customer is Loadsmart's. It's our name that's on the line, it's our responsibility. So let's talk a little bit about how it is that we choose the best carrier to guarantee service, to guarantee safety, but also to make sure that we're securing the best possible rates for our customers. So the traditional way of finding a truck, especially for a broker, is to have a bunch of people, a bunch of folks in your carrier sales team. And I wish a traditional carrier sales setup was as quiet and peaceful as these folks you see here. But the reality is that it's usually a lot of monitors, a lot of phones, a lot of hustle and bustle, a lot of yelling. Kind of reminds you of an old stock market floor. People yelling, screaming, making calls, sending emails, all of that just to cover a single load. And we believe that ultimately that's not the most efficient way to cover a load, because if you think about it, it just doesn't make sense from the unit economics of the broker to have someone make more than a certain number of calls on a given load. And if you cap the number of calls that someone's going to make, that means you limit the number of options they consider. And the fewer options you consider, the less likely you are to find that best match, best from a perspective of best service, best from a perspective of best price. So if you're limiting yourself by considering fewer options, because it just doesn't make sense to spend any more time and send any more emails or make any more phone calls, then you're already constraining your ability to find that perfect match. And in doing so, you're reducing the value that you add to the customer. So instead, we believe that there's a different and a much better approach that we can take. Especially when you consider that there are 3.83 million Class 8 trucks on the road in the US. So if I say, hey, I'm not going to make more than 5 or 10 calls to find a carrier for a given load, whatever option seems like the best after I've made those 5 or 10 calls, that's the one I'm going to go with. Think about what a tiny fraction of all the trucks that are out there that you've considered in doing that. So Loadsmart believes that you have to consider many more options. Now, I'm not going to claim that we consider 3.83 million options for every single load that moves on our platform, but we definitely consider a lot more than the 5 or 10 that would normally be typical. So let's talk about how we do that. So the mechanics of this are driven by an algorithm, just like on the pricing side, except this is a different algorithm. This is an algorithm whose job isn't to determine what our price is. This is an algorithm whose job is to determine what carriers should we offer a given load at a given price. So who is the best carrier to move this load? Who do we trust? Who do we believe is a good fit in terms of the service that they're going to provide our customer on a given lane? And what is the right price that we believe that that carrier is going to move that load for? So that's a lot for an algorithm to think about. And in order to make that decision as best we possibly can, we have all sorts of data sources, and you see them in the bottom there, whether it's RMIS, ELD providers, the FMCSA, load boards, inspection data, all sorts of data sources that are going in to feed that algorithm, to help that algorithm make the best possible decision on which carriers would be a good fit for a given load at a given price. And in doing that, we're able to have a system that learns from every single load we move. So the challenge when you've got a person making these decisions is that their ability to gauge which carrier is best is limited by their own personal experience of the loads that they themselves have moved in the past and how they use that experience to inform the procurement decisions they make going forward. The advantage of doing this through an algorithm is that the algorithm considers every lesson it's learned from every load it's covered throughout the history of the time that it's functioned and all of the data it's ever absorbed, and is able to apply all of those learnings to every single load, to every single decision that it makes. And it's able to do this at an exponentially greater speed than any person would be able to, and therefore it's able to consider many, many more options. So it has a much broader base of learning. It has a much greater experience that it can draw on, and it has the ability to take all of that data and all those experiences and to apply them to every single potential match of every carrier with every load, because it can consider those options, it can consider those matches in a fraction of a second, allowing it to make better decisions much faster and allowing us to ensure that we're finding the best possible match of every carrier for the right load that we're moving for our customers. Now, a big part of this isn't just about price, and it isn't even just about service, it's also about safety. It's about making sure that the carriers we're moving, as I mentioned, are carriers we're happy to have effectively carrying the Loadsmart brand, because if something goes wrong, we don't redirect the shipper to the carrier. We take full responsibility for that shipment, which means that any issue, any service failure is Loadsmart's problem, and we are going to take responsibility for that. So we can only work with carriers we trust, which means that we're incentivized to develop technology as well as relationships to make sure that we have high confidence, that we have a deep understanding of a carrier's insurance, their safety record, their inspection data, that everything about this carrier is as we would want it to be for them to be representing Loadsmart in front of our customer base. And that in doing that, we're able to grow our carrier network. You can see that we have over 40% of the largest carriers in the US. So if you take all the carriers with over 4,000 trucks, over 41% of those carriers are actively working with and registered on Loadsmart, as well as about a third of the smaller carriers that you see out there. So that's a huge part of the market that we have been able to onboard by actively checking, monitoring what is being said about them, what insurance they have registered, what their safety scores have been, have they re-registered their MC number in the past to try to cover past service failures, and any number of other red flags that we're able to pick up on to make sure that we avoid working with carriers that we wouldn't be proud to do business with. I can give an example of that, which is that we use load board data in kind of an unusual way. What we'll do is we'll take load board data, things like DAT and truck stop, and we'll see how many trucks a given carrier is posting as being available on DAT or on truck stop versus how many trucks they actually have. So if you've got a carrier you know has 10 trucks, but every day they're posting 100 available trucks to DAT or 100 available trucks to truck stop, the odds of that carrier dropping you after they accept a tender and then going and taking a better option are very high. That kind of peacocking is a behavior that we've seen through a data analysis is very highly correlated with service failures. It's highly correlated with last minute cancellations and the kind of behavior that we look to avoid. So we're able to see not just how a carrier behaves in directly relation to Loadsmart or even what their insurance or their safety scores are, we're also able to see how they're behaving out there in that broader ecosystem, including on load boards, and infer from that behavior, even before we've onboarded a carrier, whether this is a carrier that we want to be doing business with. And again, we've invested a huge amount in this, not because this helps us make money. No, it's because this helps us secure our brand, secure our reputation, which we consider to be incredibly valuable because we do take responsibility for that shipment all the way through, and therefore the carrier's failure is really our failure. So the last thing that we want to talk about is how quick and easy this is to set up within BluJay. And frankly, this is as much, if not more, credit to BluJay and the way that the BluJay system has been designed and architected as it is to Loadsmart. And we want to give you guys a chance to really understand the nuts and bolts of how that works.
Yeah, thanks, Hunter. Well, we really appreciate those compliments around the BluJay TMS, and likewise to the Loadsmart team. The integrations between the two platforms are seamless, and it just makes for an easy user experience by both parties, right? Which ultimately translates into the end customer of Loadsmart and the BluJay TMS having a great experience. So now that we've kind of talked about what the solution is, how it works, and why it's valuable, I wanted to quickly hit on the process for getting set up. So for our shippers that are on the call that are interested in moving forward after hearing about the solution, it's a very easy process, and I want to reiterate that there's no cost to get this set up for the shipper. It's just part of the BluJay TMS platform. It's part of Loadsmart. Obviously, when you tender Loadsmart loads, you still have to pay them for those loads. But in terms of getting the solution enabled, the API connection turned on, and that real-time rating engine, there's no cost whatsoever. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to reach out to your BluJay Solutions Client Service Manager, or if you're a logistics as a service managed transportation customer, you'd reach out to your logistics manager here at BluJay and just express that you're interested in moving forward with turning on the Loadsmart real-time rating engine. And then from there, we'll have you guys enter in a customer support ticket. and add LOAA to your network. If you're not already doing existing business with them as a contract carrier, it's really easy to get them added to your network through just the standard carrier onboarding process. And then the incremental step around the API piece is that our support team just enables the API connection. There's very minimal, like 5-second configuration in the BluJay TMS. And then from there, you have instant access and capacity to their extensive network of carriers that have obviously been pre-vetted. Hunter gave some great context as to how that process works. And then you get that 100% tender acceptance through your carrier shop and or dynamic routing guides that you would have configured. So very easy. And you know, this process is just outlined right here for you guys.
Okay, great, guys. Really appreciate your time, Hunter. Very thorough presentation, and you, Brian, as well. There are a couple questions that came through. May have been answered, but I'll put them out there anyways, and maybe we can just reiterate them, and we'll see if anything else comes in as well. This first one will go to you, Hunter. What is Loadsmart's current on-time goals and actuals for this piece of the business?
Sure. So we align with each of our customers on what their expectations are. Some customers are tendering us, last-minute freight, and they're extremely price sensitive, and they understand that therefore, their service expectations are maybe not quite the same. But a lot of our customers are larger enterprise customers with really high expectations. So I would say that the majority of our customers are looking for something in a 90 to 95% on-time range. Some emphasize on-time pickup, but most emphasize delivery. We tend to obsess with on-time pickup because, of course, as you can imagine, the best way to ensure an on-time delivery is to achieve an on-time pickup. But what I can share is that we've been able to retain 100% of our SME and enterprise customers who have these really high service level expectations. And on average, our service levels are in that 90 to 95% range, including for same day and next day booking. So we invest a lot in delivering that service level, and of course we coordinate closely with the customer to make sure we understand exactly what they need. I'm sure you guys will know that there's more to meeting a customer's needs than just specifically hitting an on-time pickup or on-time delivery number. But we do invest a lot in that, and we do aim to be in that 90 plus, ideally around that 95% range. And we are able to deliver that the vast majority of time for the vast majority of our customers.
Okay, great. Thank you. Second question, if we already have existing carriers and rates automatically tendered, how do we cross-compare Loadsmart before these load tenders are executed? Brian, that was for you.
Yep, I can take that, Lee. So that's where the dynamic routing guide piece comes into play. If you currently have your routing guide set up as static, there's a few different options within the routing guide where you can switch it from being static to dynamic. And I would suggest when you reach out to your BluJay client service manager, if you want to learn a little bit more about what those options are, I'm not going to dive into the specific settings and details today. That's where you would plug and play that dynamic piece, which would ultimately insert Loadsmart wherever you would like them based off their pricing.
Okay, thank you. And then does this platform handle flatbed truckloads for industrial customers versus retailers?
We actually have just begun offering flatbed as an option. So this is a relatively new solution for us, but it is something that we're now able to offer. So I would encourage you to reach out to the Loadsmart sales team. I'm sure we'll share an address or a contact afterwards. But yes, we are able to offer flatbed now, and we have several customers that are beginning to leverage that. So feel free to reach out, and we hope that we'll be able to support you on that.
Yep, and we will be sharing that after the Q&A, and I'll do a little outtake here, guys. The last question I've entered in the pane, so if there is anything else, please make sure you enter your questions within the question pane here within the webinar. Last one I have, can Loadsmart provide a link for us to receive copies of insurance certificates, W-9, ACH information? Which I think are two separate questions because ACH will go to you.
Sure. So we will provide all of that information for Loadsmart. And when you're working with us, you're only working directly with Loadsmart. So we're never going to ask you to connect with the carrier or to have a direct interaction with the carrier. So we're able to provide all of that information, our W-9, our letter of authority, and our insurance. And what we're doing the vast majority of the time is that we are signing a carrier agreement with the shippers. So we are in all respects, operationally as well as legally and for invoicing and other purposes, we're acting as a carrier. So the load runs under our SCAT code. Loadsmart is going to invoice the customer, and Loadsmart's going to take full responsibility for all of the legal insurance and other responsibilities that come with moving customers' freight. And so, of course, as part of that, we're more than happy to provide all of our tax documentation, our insurance information, as well as our letter of authority and everything else.
Great. And I don't see any other questions at this point. So at this time, I will thank you again, both Brian and Hunter. For the audience, please know that you can reach out to either Hunter or myself for initial questions, or as Brian had mentioned, your representative at either Loadsmart or BluJay. And I want to thank Loadsmart for their partnership, as well as our customers who've taken time and others who've taken time out of their busy day-to-day to learn more about this, how the solution can bring value to your supply chain. So appreciate everybody's time and enjoy your day.
Thanks, Lee and Brian and the BluJay team for organizing this, and thanks everybody for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for being a great partner.